So imagine getting a check for $1,000 literally every single month with absolutely no strings attached.
Mhm.
I mean, would you work less or start a business or maybe just go buy a new car?
Yeah, it really is like the ultimate economic thought experiment. And, for a long time, we just had to rely on these theoretical models to guess how human beings would actually respond to that kind of financial cushion.
Right. But we don't have to guess anymore. And honestly, the timing on this couldn't be more critical. The stakes for this idea are just absolutely massive right now.
Oh, for sure. They really are.
Just look at the news hook from this week. I mean, California's poverty rate just hit an alarming 18.9%. That is, we're talking about 7.3 million people who currently lack the resources to just meet basic needs.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, it effectively erases all those temporary economic gains we saw during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So in response, lawmakers are pushing Assembly Bill 661. It's this major proposal to study a permanent statewide guaranteed income program. But right as this political momentum builds across the country, a massive $45 million three-year study funded by OpenAI CEO Sam Altman just dropped its findings.
And those findings are honestly sending absolute shockwaves through the current political debate.
Oh, total.
Because giving people free money definitely provides immediate relief. Like, nobody disputes that fact at all.
Mm.
But the data reveals it completely defies what both the advocates and the critics confidently predicted it would do to human behavior.
Exactly. And that brings us to today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. If you're joining us today, our mission is to unpack a really fascinating stack of sources to understand what actually happens when we give people unconditional cash.
Yeah, we're looking at some heavy hitters today.
We really are. We've got the landmark Open Research NBER working paper, some really interesting think tank editorials from the Pacific Research Institute and the Badger Institute, and local university reviews from UC Davis.
Right. And we're going to strip away the politics here.
Absolutely. No taking sides.
Yeah.
We just want to look at the actual mechanisms of what this money does to, work, wealth, and well-being.
Right. Because to really grasp the weight of this new mega study, we kind of have to understand why guaranteed income became such a prominent idea in the first place.
Yeah, it didn't just come out of nowhere.
Exactly. Long before Sam Altman spent $45 million, we saw a wave of much smaller, highly localized pilot programs. These were really just designed to test the waters.
Right, like that famous Stockton economic empowerment demonstration.
Yeah, the Stockton one.
That was spearheaded by former Mayor Michael Tubbs. They were giving more than 100 residents $500 a month with zero strings attached. And, the early results there looked incredibly promising.
They did.
The data showed people used the money to buy just absolute necessities. Like during the height of the pandemic, they specifically used it to buy bulk food to keep their families fed.
Yeah, and we saw a very similar dynamic play out in Yolo County, California, too.
Oh, right, the YOLO pilot. Tell us about that one.
So they ran a program giving 76 families, and these were mostly single-parent households, an average of $1,300 a month for 2 full years.
Wow, $1,300 a month.
Yeah, it's substantial. And the immediate impact there was profound, especially when you look at the cognitive relief it provided, because poverty imposes this massive mental tax on people.
Oh, 100%. It's exhausting.
Right. When you're constantly calculating how to afford your next meal, you literally don't have the bandwidth to plan for the future.
Yeah, and there's this very specific detail from the UC Davis review of that Yolo County program that really sticks with you. One mother reported that the cash literally got her and her daughter out of living in their car and into a motel.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it provided this massive immediate reprieve from the daily grind of poverty.
Yeah.
It meant parents could actually focus on the kids' educational needs instead of just, surviving until sunset.
Exactly. It drastically reduced parental stress. The parents themselves reported that this reduction in anxiety positively changed their kids' childhoods.
I mean, that makes total sense.
Right. When you live below the poverty line, injecting an extra $1,300 a month creates a sudden, vital buffer against disaster.
Yeah, I hear that, and it makes perfect sense on a human level. It's basically classic crisis management. Like, think about it as putting your oxygen mask on first when the cabin pressure drops on a plane.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. It absolutely saves you from passing out in that terrifying moment. But nobody pretends that putting on an oxygen mask actually fixes the engine on the airplane.
No, of course not.
So the question becomes, does a small 2-year program actually prove that people can use this money to build a permanent path to financial independence.
And see, that's the billion-dollar question right there. And to their credit, the researchers at UC Davis recognized that exact limitation.
They did.
Yeah, they openly admitted that for participants who were trapped in deep, multi-generational poverty, the Yolo County program simply wasn't enough to create a lasting trajectory out of it.
Right, because it ends.
Exactly. It was a vital lifeline, but what happens on day one of year three, when the money stops? Furthermore, we have to acknowledge that those early pilots were heavily distorted by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, that's true, which makes it really hard to measure normal economic behavior. Like, you can't figure out if someone is starting a business or looking for a job when the entire global economy is essentially locked down.
Precisely. We needed a study that stripped away the pandemic noise entirely, and that brings us to the biggest, most rigorous test ever conducted on this topic.
The Open Research Unconditional Cash Study.
That's the one, led by researcher Eva Vivald and, as you mentioned, heavily funded by Sam Altman.
And the scale of this experiment is wild. Let's break down the mechanics for a second so you can picture who we're talking about.
Yeah, let's look at the numbers.
So they tracked 3,000 low-income participants across Illinois and Texas. The average baseline income for these individuals was about $29,000 a year.
Okay, so firmly low income.
Right. And they split them randomly into two groups. 1,000 people received $1,000 a month for 3 full years. The control group, which was the remaining 2,000 people, got $50 a month.
And there's a crucial rule underpinning this entire study. The cash was entirely unconditional.
Why is that specific mechanism so important to the design? I mean, why emphasize unconditional?
Because traditional welfare programs in the United States usually have what economists call a benefits cliff.
A benefits cliff.
Right. If you're on traditional government assistance and you happen to get $1 an hour raise at work, or maybe you just take on a few extra shifts, you might cross an income threshold.
Oh, and then you lose your benefits.
Exactly. You suddenly lose $500 in food stamps or housing assistance. So you are actively financially penalized for trying to earn more money.
That's so frustrating.
It really is. But in this mega study, the researchers worked directly with state governments to ensure these $1,000 payments wouldn't trigger that cliff. No matter how much money you made at your job, you kept the grand a month.
So logically, if there's no penalty for working, and you certainly have a concrete financial safety net under you, you'd assume people would use that money as a springboard.
Right.
Like, if I know I'm not going to starve and lose my apartment if my new business fails, I'm going to take a risk. I'll go back to school, get a certification, or, swing for the fences with a new career.
That is exactly what the prevailing economic models predicted. It's basically the central promise made by advocates of universal basic income. But the actual human beings in the study did something completely different.
And here's where the data gets incredibly fascinating. We move from the theory of the springboard to the hard numbers on what people actually did with their careers and their bank accounts. And the data on work reveals this massive paradox.
It really does, because participants who received the $1,000 a month actually reduced their work by an average of 1.3 to 1.5 hours a week.
Where they work less.
Yes. Overall labor market participation across the group dropped by 4.1 percentage points.
And looking at the household dynamics, it wasn't just the person getting the check who pulled back, right? Partners and other adults living in the exact same household also worked less.
Exactly. Income pooling is a very real phenomenon. When a household suddenly has an extra $12,000 a year of guaranteed cash flow, the pressure on the secondary earner drops significantly.
That makes sense.
But because they collectively chose to work less, their individual earned income actually fell by $1,500 to $1,800 a year.
Wow. If you're listening right now, just think about your own budget and that math for a second. They're receiving $12,000 a year in free cash, but their earned paycheck shrinks by almost $2,000 because they actively step back from their jobs.
Right. The Pacific Research Institute highlighted a staggering statistic from the study. For every $1 of free money received, total household earned income fell by 21 to 28 cents.
So it's basically canceling out a chunk of the benefit.
Yeah, it essentially acts as a behavioral tax. The money comes in and the work output goes down.
But even with that drop in earned income, they still have a massive net positive from the $1,000 a month. So you'd naturally assume their overall net worth still went up.
Right. Surprisingly, it didn't.
How does that work mechanically? Like, where does the value go?
Well, a study showed they did save a bit more cash initially. They built up some liquidity. but those savings were completely wiped out by a corresponding increase in debt.
Debt.
Yes. Specifically, total auto debt among the participants spiked by 17%.
Wow.
In some cases, recipients actually ended up with a lower net worth than the control group who only received $50 a month.
That is wild. It sounds like we put them on a treadmill. We sped up the treadmill by handing them cash, but instead of running faster to build wealth, they just stepped off entirely. But help me understand the lending mechanics here. Why would someone take on more debt just because they have $1,000 extra a month?
It comes down to how banks calculate risk and debt-to-income ratios. A steady, guaranteed cash flow of $1,000 a month gives an individual a lot of personal confidence. But more importantly, it gives a lender confidence.
Ah, I see.
Right. That new, verifiable monthly income helps you qualify for a car loan that you previously would have been denied for. So they bought cars.
And cars are expensive.
Very. And because a car is a rapidly depreciating asset tied to an interest-bearing loan, they accumulated more debt than they did long-term savings.
Okay, so if they're working fewer hours and their overall net worth isn't rising because they've taken on auto debt, where exactly is all this extra time and money actually going?
Well, let's tackle the money first, because the data busts a very old political myth here. The numbers clearly show this money did not go to vice.
Really?
Yeah, only 1% of the funds went to things like alcohol or gambling.
That's a huge point, only 1%. I mean, it completely contradicts the old welfare queen stereotype that gets thrown around in political debates.
It does. The money overwhelmingly went to survival basics, rent, food, and transportation, but the time is a completely different story.
Right, the 1.5 hours a week they gained.
Exactly. Remember, they gained over an hour of free time a week by working less. The data shows that this extra time was not spent on job searching. It wasn't spent on finding better childcare. It wasn't spent on starting those new businesses we talked about earlier.
So if the extra time wasn't going into job hunting or side hustles, looking at the data, it seems to have been absorbed almost entirely by leisure.
It went almost exclusively to leisure.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for the listener here for a second. Is buying yourself free time inherently a bad thing?
That's a fair question.
Honestly, if someone handed me an extra $1,000 a month, I'd probably want a breather too. I'd want to relax and watch a movie. The lead researcher, Eva Vivold, even pointed out a specific participant, a single mother of 8, who was working as a school bus driver and a care professional.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about her.
Right. With the cash, she could finally afford to just stop and watch a movie every week.
That sounds like a profound human victory to me. And the researchers completely validate that perspective. Cash gives people the ultimate agency to choose what they value most in life.
Yeah.
And clearly, when given the choice, human beings value free time, rest, and family over climbing the corporate ladder or grinding out a side hustle.
So we see this massive shift toward leisure time, which naturally makes you wonder about the downstream effects on well-being. If people are resting more and stressing less about rent, you'd expect to see a huge spike in physical and mental health.
You would certainly hypothesize that, but the physical health of the participants showed absolutely no real improvement compared to the control group.
None.
None. In fact, the researchers noted a 4.2 percentage point increase in participants' self-reporting of physical disability.
Wait, I want to make sure I understand the mechanism there. The money didn't physically make them more disabled.
No, not at all. The researchers hypothesized that this is actually an access issue. Because these individuals finally had the time off from work and the money to afford a copay, they could finally go to a doctor and get officially diagnosed for health problems they likely already had but had been ignoring just to survive.
Oh, wow. That makes a lot of sense. The cash basically bought them healthcare access.
Yeah.
What about mental health, though? If you're not agonizing over grocery bills, your stress levels must plummet.
Mental health and stress metrics did improve dramatically in year 1. The relief was palpable in the data. But what's fascinating is the psychological mechanism that kicked in next.
What happened?
Those mental health benefits completely faded back to the baseline by year 3.
Wait, meaning they were no happier or less stressed than the people getting $50 a month. Why does that happen?
It's a psychological phenomenon called hedonic adaptation. Basically, humans are incredibly adaptable creatures. We get used to our new normal really quickly.
Where the novelty wears off.
Exactly. When you first get an extra $1,000, it's euphoric. It solves immediate crises. But by year 3, that $1,000 is just your baseline budget. The thrill wears off, the lifestyle creep sets in, and your baseline stress returns, just centered around new problems.
Wow. So what does this all mean when we zoom out from the individual choices to the national policy debate?
Yeah.
If the proven result of free money is more leisure, more debt, and less work, with fleeting mental health benefits, should taxpayers foot the bill for it?
That's where the trillion-dollar policy divide opens up. We have sources with starkly different but data-backed views on this.
Let's break them down.
Well, the Badger Institute ran the macroeconomic numbers and noted that a true universal basic income of $1,000 a month for all adults would cost $2.8 trillion a year.
$2.8 trillion. Just to give you a sense of scale, if you're listening, $2.8 trillion is more than the combined annual budgets of Social Security and Medicare. It's an astronomical sum.
It really is. Even if you heavily limit the program to just lower income brackets, it still costs roughly $600 billion a year.
Which is still massive.
Right. And the editorial board at the Las Vegas Review-Journal argues this is a fundamentally flawed policy. They look at this data and say it promotes dependency, decreases the inherent dignity of work, and actively turns part-time workers into non-workers.
So they see the drop in hours as a massive negative.
Exactly. Their stance is that a societal safety net should incentivize self-sufficiency, not reduce productivity.
But on the flip side, proponents look at the exact same data and argue that unconditional cash is the only tool that gives poor families the dignity of choice.
Yeah, the dignity argument is really strong for advocates.
Because it provides immediate relief from crushing crises, like the mother who got out of her car and into a motel in Yolo County. It trusts people to know what they actually need, whether that's a car loan to get to a better job or just an hour of sleep, rather than forcing them through a maze of degrading government bureaucracy.
Absolutely. Both sides now have empirical data from this mega study to back up their worldview.
It kind of feels like we're judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree here. We designed an anti-poverty tool, we deployed it, and now we're upset that it didn't act like a magic economic stimulus tool.
That's the perfect synthesis of the data, honestly.
Really?
Yeah. The Open Research Megastudy proved beyond a doubt that unconditional cash is an incredibly effective tool for giving people agency, providing immediate crisis relief, and buying them free time. It does exactly what it says on the tin.
What?
But it completely failed to prove the grander economic promises made by its biggest advocates. It did not foster sustainable, long-term financial independence. It did not increase overall net worth. And it certainly did not increase economic productivity in the labor market.
So to wrap this deep dive up for you, unconditional cash guarantees basic survival. It buys people precious, much-needed free time. But human nature, as shown in the data, reveals that when given a cushion, we naturally tend to rest on it rather than use it as a trampoline.
And tying it all together, that brings us back to why Sam Altman funded this $45 million study in the first place. Oh, right, because he's the CEO of OpenAI.
Exactly. He fundamentally believes that artificial intelligence will soon replace millions of traditional jobs, making some form of basic income not just an experiment, but an absolute necessity for human survival.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to chew on. If this definitive study proves that free cash leads directly to more leisure time and a withdrawal from the workforce, what does a society look like when our primary identity is built around how we spend our leisure rather than how we earn our living? Something to think about next time you clock in for work.